So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. So, in a time when higher education and global politics are very uncertain at this time, we gather to affirm the enduring value of community. So, Stephen's book, this new book invites us to consider how democratic political education, rooted in humility, we're looking at resistance and civic dignity, can help us build peace not through dominance, but through shared power. So as we celebrate 65 years, continue celebrating 65 years of the founding of the African Studies Center and engagement in Africa, Steve himself being one of our champion core faculty members who has continued to engage and dedicated to this work on the African continent. We congratulate you for this great work, this book that you share with us today. And it's really important for us as well and to recognize this achievement. And, we'll talk about moving towards a call for radical poise in turbulent times. It seems very fitting, right, for today, for our event today. So I thank everybody for taking time to come here this afternoon. And this book premieres an environment where we try to create an environment where it's more relaxed, but still a scholarly setting where we celebrate the great work that the faculty here that do research in Africa are doing through their publication. So I hope you enjoy it. We thank Marcy here for agreeing to moderate this premiere event, and then I'll pass it on to her to lead us through the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I am very happy to be moderating this discussion and conversation. And this is not going to be the formal presentation where Steve's going to be reading a zillion excerpts and we're going to be sitting and biting our hands and tongues until the end of the presentation. This is really a conversation with everyone. We want to, if you have a question, feel free, raise your hand and speak up and ask a question. But I'm just honored to be here with Steve. I have known you for, I'm going on 20 years now.
When I was that old.
And I really got to know Steve's work after I was a grad student. I think I had started to get to know your work a bit, but then I became the advisor for Peace and Justice Studies and started teaching some of those courses in Peace and Justice. And some of them, Globalization and Justice, just peace and justice in general. And there were certain readings that really stuck out to me and to the students. And as soon as we started doing those readings, the class really couldn't shut up, which is always an amazing thing, right? You can get a class full of students who really want to talk. And one of them was about the political responsibilities of everyday bystanders. Yeah. And really the thought of, if this thing is happening to me, I'm concerned. If this thing is happening to them, maybe I pretend I don't see it, maybe I am concerned, but I don't want to act on it. And what point do I act? At what point do I step in? At what point do I say it's not my responsibility or it's not my problem? And that really got the students talking and thinking. And it got me thinking. From every moment after, and I've talked to my husband Stu about this a million times, like, what do we do when we see injustice? What do we do when we see things happening in the world? And right now, we're at a point where we see many things that seem unjust, and there's a point where we can kind of say, not my problem until it gets to me, not my problem until it hits my neighbor. And really, I love your work, Steve, and the questions that you ask us, because you're not out there saying what people should do. You're asking us to reflect. You're asking us to think and reflect and then to act. And so that's really what I'd like to have us sort of bring to the table today, to this conversation. So again, this isn't going to be a typical book talk. We know that the book is primarily about your work in Mali, but this is not a book only about Mali. This is not only a book for people who are interested in Mali and those who are Malians. This is a book about where are we in humanity? How do we work towards peace? Not just in what we often think of as peace building, where it can come from on high, but this everyday peace building. And I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I'm talking a lot now, but Steve's going to talk later. But one thing I want to sort of preface this with too is there's an image that I think we're all familiar with, and Steve has it in the beginning of the book, and it's of Escher's stairways. And sometimes it may seem like we as a society, or we even as a family or a community, are going in one direction, and it seems like we're going to hit a summit and we're going to keep going. And then all of a sudden we keep taking those same stairs and somehow have found ourselves back down at a level where, wait a minute, we thought we were going up and now we're going down. And so thinking about the world as not linear, and all of the changes and things that can take place in this work of navigating cycles of violence and peace building without expecting linear progress or definitive solutions. And so this is how we're going to start this conversation, Steve. And I'm going to ask you some questions and get the conversation going. So if you'd like to say a couple words first, feel free. Otherwise, I will hop in.
Okay, I'll take advantage of your reference to the Escher image, which I don't think is on the slideshow, but people can imagine Escher and how you think you're climbing the stairs and then suddenly the staircase is going down and it's a surprise. And there's another image that probably is familiar to you, and that's Camus' image of the myth of Sisyphus, right, where you're pushing a boulder up a hill, and when you get to the top, the boulder rolls back down and you just go back down and you keep doing it. So I chose the image of the staircases rather than the image of the boulder because, oddly enough, I think it's more hopeful. I think Escher's image is more hopeful, right? Sisyphus, keeps at it, but there's no change, right? It's the same thing over and over. When you look at the Escher etchings, you see that there are people on the sideline as well, watching, reflecting on what's going on. You're not a solo actor in Escher's world, whereas poor Sisyphus is all alone, and there's nothing he can do but keep doing the same thing over and over, And Escher suggests we need other people to give us, their perspective, to see what we're going through. And so I, for a variety of reasons, but especially for that reason, I want a kind of gentle hopefulness in this book. Not a, we're gonna win, but rather we need to talk to each other, like Marcy has invited us to do today. We need to see the world from other perspectives and not just our own. And that for me was the hopefulness of that somewhat chilling Escher etching. So it's at the beginning. And if I can just add one more thing, you see what happens when you give me an inch, I'll take a mile. Right? I have several of my students in here who will shake their heads. It's also related to one of the artists, the South African artist, William Kentridge, who in lectures that he gave at Harvard, where he wasn't sure he had anything to say, but he could just tell people what he does for a living. He says at one point, we're not stationary figures. We are always on the move. And the power we have, even in the 21st century, is foot power. It's the power we have to put one foot in front of the other, to join processions, to march, as Leo said, to protest, to resist, but it takes more than one person to do it. Sisyphus is not a protester, right? But we can be if we remember we have power in movement, and that we are, it's kind of, to use a philosophical word, that's our ontology. We are beings on the move. And so with Kentridge and Escher now on my team, I'm ready for your questions.
I'm going to bring it really quickly to the fact that the book is very collaborative.
Mhm.
And I know this from my experiences watching you work with a wonderful team and being involved in parts of the Photo Voice project in Mali, through the Pura project that we had in Benin and in Mali, and seeing the real dedication that you and an entire team of people had. And so I'm just going to read so I can make sure that I get everybody's names right and I'm not leaving anybody out. But so the book is collaborative. Steve's the author, but the work wouldn't exist without Malian team leaders who held the projects together through a lot of uncertainty. And this is through coups, through violence, through incredible uncertainty on a day-to-day basis. And this is Boubacar Sy, Boubacar Garango, and Moussa J. Dembele. And I had the pleasure and privilege of meeting with them in Benin and seeing how wonderful they worked as a team, and then observing through a WhatsApp group that's so active, how they work with mentors who then worked with mentees, and Steve working with everyone together. This was a really collaborative effort. And something that I noticed when we were all together in Benin is, thinking in the translation from English to French. And when we say every day, my translation when I'm thinking is that the quotidien, every day. But the French that is used by the team is not quotidien. It's not, this is the everyday. It is le pain de tous les jours. It's of all of the days, every day. So it's like, it's not just something that happens, it is something that is happening. And it makes me think of your thoughts of procession, and movement. And it's like, you're not just sitting and waiting for this to happen. It's not happening on its own. These are the activities and events that are taking place every day, and the things that people can do to cultivate peace. And at every day, in a situation where it seems like that could be, for some, unthinkable. And so I just want to acknowledge the work that everyone has done, and the team leaders who are, again, incredible. So I'm going to bring it from the everyday to the role of the arts. And I'd like to start with, if you can go 2 slides. Yeah. I'd like to talk about these 2 quotes here. And you could have started with facts and figures. You could have said 72 million displaced or internally displaced people. Why did you choose these 2 quotes? And I'd like to know, what are you trying to orient us towards from the very beginning?
Right. Can I add one thing to the team?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
those 2 team leaders, we were on Zoom today, preparing for our meeting on Saturday with the Vice Chancellor and a faculty member at the Université Yambo Ologem de Bamako to plan the next step on the staircase. So it's an ongoing process. But the team is actually bigger than that. So there are a few team members right here in the room that I will identify. The first is Chris, my wife, Chris Warland, who's not just a support person for me. She worked with us starting in 2004 in Mali, doing peace building work at the ground level in Kati, and continues to add to the mix. So thank you, Chris. And all the way in the back, another member of the team, Moussa Traore, an MSU graduate, a participant in the Mali Study Abroad program. And I love to quote Moussa because, in our work in Mali, and we were on email today, in fact, talking about other challenges that I have. He would always say to the other students on the Study Abroad program, when they were a little when they felt like the staircase was pretty steep. And they weren't sure what was around the next bend, Musa would say, "This is how we do it. This is how we do it," right? We put one foot in front of the other, we get to work, we do the work, and he has done the work. And so Musa, thank you. You've been an inspiration to our team and to me. So thank you very much. Good to have you here. So in addition to those people who happen to be here, there are 12 right now mentors from the university who work with us, and 25 mentees who work with us. So the team is actually 3 plus 12 plus 25, plus a variety of other people in official positions who give us their permission to do what we do. Because we have to have that too. We can't just walk in and say, all right, we're getting to work here, out of the way. There are, officials who have to give us their blessing, and they have, as well as the African Studies Center and MSU. So it's been an institution, a hybrid project, we call it. It's a hybrid project. It's local, it's every day, but it's also hybrid. So to my students like Musa and Vesper and Satyam in the back, more recent students, it helps to, have that participation. As you were saying, students talk, and it's good to hear what they have to say. Yeah, you got students talk, and faculty should listen. So
And quickly speaking up. Hi, Musa. I haven't seen you in a long time. Musa was in Peace and Justice.
yeah.
And I haven't seen you in probably 10 years or something. So
Wow.
Good to see you.
So your question is these two quotations.
Yeah.
Why did I pick two not African writers, right? Robert Musil, the mid-20th century writer who wrote a book that's too long for anybody to finish, and Didier Fassin, who was the director of Doctors Without Borders, as well as an anthropologist and a sociologist. And these two quotes come from Fassin's book, and he uses that line from Musil as an epigraph to the book. So I'll read that, and then I'll talk about why Fassin wanted it as his epigraph, and why I wanted to, and another Malian partner, Baba Gindo, who I would be remiss in not saying thank you for all you do. Life forms a surface that acts as if it could not be otherwise, but under its skin, things are pounding and pulsing. And think about that for a minute. I think what Fassin was seeing in that line was the way in which the appearance, I'll use a Hegelian phrase, the appearance of democracy, the appearance of peace, is just a form, a kind of carapace, a covering over a lot of conflict, over a lot of violence, and that if you look beneath the surface, you will see, human beings struggling. You will see human beings who are, he calls them in general, nomads, right? But those nomads are refugees, migrants, fugitives from violence, fugitives awaiting their turn, turning around the corner, and undocumented workers. They're sometimes called what I call conditional citizens and provisional citizens. And they're the ones who have the energy. They're the ones who are on the move. They're the ones who are pulsing. And it's their story that Fassin wants to tell, and it's their story that I've wanted to tell. So I guess my role, to wrap around to the bystander, my way of dealing with my role as a bystander sometimes is to say, I can help those people tell their stories. I can be of some assistance in helping them find their voice and helping them take that next step on that staircase, not to nowhere, but that staircase to, you know, a world in which democracy and peace are not just a thin skin that covers what is otherwise a very painful reality. So that's why I wanted to start with that, to say, while the book is about struggles all over the world, and many of them in Africa, and many of them in Mali, it's not limited to that. It's about a larger world we share, and a larger world in which, as we well know right now, you know, those folks that Fassin calls nomads in general are our neighbors, are the people who are under enormous pressure. Chris was telling me ICE is in Okamus. It's here. So to think that this is happening somewhere else is just to close your eyes to what's happening, you know, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our families, to our teammates, you know. And we actually had to change the name of our project in Mali for the safety of the people that we work with. So we couldn't call it Peacebuilding.
What do you call it?
We call it literacy, so that it doesn't attract, you know, the wrong kind of attention.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there are people in the U.S. right now, I don't want to get off topic, but there are people in the U.S. right now who have to be careful how they describe the work they do. Right? It's just, it's a global situation.
Yeah.
But keep me on track.
I'll keep you on track. We're talking about, you know, displacement, internally displaced persons. So 72 million internally displaced people. Mali alone has 400,000 internally displaced people. But what you're talking about also brings it beyond that, right? It's beyond internally displaced people. And one of the points you bring out in the book is that there are policies that are put into place, or there are initiatives that are enacted. But many people who are internally displaced or not are saying what is happening is not working for me. And I would like you to talk a little bit about what you call indicators of everyday peace. Because I think that can go from displaced persons, internally or otherwise, to individuals who are living in a community who are insecure, are facing insecurity in any sort of way. So I'd like you to talk a little bit more about what do you consider these everyday peace indicators.
Can we flip to that slide?
I think that slide might have, might
Is it
not
too
be
far
here.
along?
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we hold that?
Yeah.
I remember.
Okay.
Okay, so, and my students will remember them too. So one of the motivations for this book was a feeling that top-down attempts at peace building and, yeah, peace building, I'll just use that term without defining it too much right now, have not worked. Truth commissions, war crimes tribunals, other sorts of interventions from the top down have left much undone and have done some damage. And the idea of everyday peace indicators is not original with me. Several other scholars have seen the need for finding other ways from the bottom up to achieve some peace. And so they've asked people, have the rulings of the International Criminal Court changed your life? They said, no, not much. It hasn't really changed my everyday life. Have the sort of hearings at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission changed your everyday life? Not appreciably. So what would change your life? The ability to the ability to be able to go to the market, buy food, the ability to have my children safely go to school. That would change my life. The ability to be able to knock on the door of the local politician and tell them that something needs to be fixed. That would change my life. So there are things at the local level that would make a difference and make my life more peaceful and, as I see it, more democratic, would empower people. And so, you know, the goal of the work has been in part to orient people towards the everyday, the importance of everyday peace, and have them articulate what would be an everyday peace indicator for them and how they would go about achieving it. So that's the main idea. And you can help people see the importance of everyday peace, but that's just the first step, to see it. The next step is to find your voice so that you can articulate that to other people, so you can make the case for everyday peace in your village, in your community, and so you're empowered to improve on those indicators, make it happen.
Yeah.
So that's the reason for this awkward notion of everyday peace. Let me go back to people are on the move and what it means to say human beings are beings on the move as opposed to stationary. There's a French philosopher, Michel Certeau, who says, you know, to walk through town and just stay on the road and stay on the sidewalk is one way of getting from here to there. But after a while, you don't really see anything more. You're just doing what you do every day. A real sort of everyday walker would be someone who takes a different route, who goes through somebody else's neighborhood, who sees the community differently every time they walk through the neighborhood. So part of what we've tried to do is give people those opportunities to see what's familiar to them from a different angle, to see their school from a different angle. It doesn't have to be a school in which there's corporal punishment. It doesn't have to be a school in which handicapped kids don't come. It doesn't have to be a school in which girls drop out in the 4th grade and only boys go to the middle school, right? There are other ways of doing that, other ways of seeing the everyday, seeing the market, seeing the school, seeing the neighborhood, seeing the water and sanitation differently. So being a walker through everyday life can be an education, and that's part of the goal, to get people to both see things and walk through their lives with, you know, with that kind of attention to detail.
Yeah. And you know, I actually really did see you and Boubacar Sy in Benin walking, you know, taking every morning and saying, okay, we're going to walk and we're going to walk around and we're going to see this neighborhood. And in places that I had been visiting for nearly 20 years,
Yeah.
I'd never seen, because I was kind of sticking to my routine and I'm on this side and I'm going over here,
Yeah.
and being like, oh, I've never even noticed that one thing. So like walking again and being on the ground is really a wonderful way to experience the world and to see that it can change even from day to day.
Yeah.
The day before, no rain, everything's passable. Rain comes, okay, we're gonna have to hop on some rocks, right? And walk through. So I really appreciate that. And if we can go to the next slide, you introduced the term demos, and you define it, you know, specifically, but not just citizens, but conditional citizens and prospective citizens, including displaced persons and fugitives. can you talk more about this notion of the difference between power over and power with in this process of democratic political education within a demos?
Yeah, good question.
Thanks.
So demos, it's a Greek word, but so is democracy. It comes from two Greek words, demos and kratia. Demos meaning the people, kratia meaning power, right? And for me, that's important to remember that democracy is a system in which, a system of everyday life as well as a form of government in which people are the origins of power and retain control over power. They are not, it's not a system in which people have to protect themselves from the power of the state, right? That's the power of the state over people, and some people think of constitutional democracy as a system in which private citizens are protected and served by state power. For me, that's a very narrow and not sort of very democratic way of thinking about the people. The people should be the origins of power, and they should retain control over power, demos and kratia. So I think that refers to their everyday life, and not just when they are asked to vote on a peace accord once every 20 years, or vote for a new political party once every 4 years or 6 years. Demos is an ongoing, is an active sort of way of being in the world. And it should be inclusive. The more inclusive it is, the more power is at the disposal of people, and the power is something they share. That's power with, as opposed to power over them, which is what, what I have a somewhat jaundiced view of liberal democracy. That's what liberal democracy has reduced democracy to, right? The protection of individual citizens from state power. And we've seen it taken to an extreme. Here I go again a little bit. We've seen it taken to an extreme in the current American context, where some people say state power should be reduced and should only serve the rich, and there is no role for the people in governance. They are just simply involved in private enterprise, and they're the haves and the have-nots. Like I said, I'm going to be tempted every once in a while. But did I answer your question?
Yeah.
All right.
I think so. I think we're in a position. And I really appreciate that too, because sometimes we think of power as, I don't know if I didn't want this, but I sometimes think of power as a negative thing, like someone having too much power and it being, it's always like abuse of power or this or that. And really this thought of power with and power together. Mm-hmm. And thinking of like, okay, this is, again, like you said, movement. We can have movement together. And recognizing that there are, as used to be the language when I was in grad school, of that asymmetrical power relations, right, between mm-hmm. countries and between people within a society and between people within a family. And saying, okay, well, we can acknowledge that those exist, mm-hmm. and we can say that they exist and they're bad, or we can say, all right, let's band together mm-hmm. and do something that we can do more together than we could if we were each in our own position saying this is bad.
Right.
So I really appreciate that.
And I mean, it takes me back to Moussa Traore's, encouragement. We can do this, right? There's the Ubuntu notion. It's not just Ubuntu. It's a conception of collective identity, right? Democratic citizenship is a collective identity from my sort of point of view. And some of the theorists, I'm going to sort of plug the book here, some of the theorists in the book may seem a little out of place. And I cite them not to agree with them, but to use them as foils to talk about the demos and how has it been characterized. And sometimes the demos is right out there on the front lines, marching, generating new power, arm in arm. Sometimes the demos is fugitive, right? It has to step back. It has to say, you know, this is a time for a different staircase, right? There's another staircase, we know it. Maybe it's underground. Maybe it takes us around a different corner. But we have to remember, you know, that there is, you know, we have to keep our eye on the prize. We have to remember what the marching is for, but it doesn't always require direct confrontation with others. It can be, you know, a form of fusion. There is even a noun I've seen in some theorists. It shows you what academics can do if you let them, you know, create too much. There's some forms of fugitivity. That's not a Woody Allen word. There's some forms of fugitivity that are moderate, that you're biding your time. Think of Harriet Tubman. Think of people, different people taking different routes, right? Different staircases. It's starting to sound a little, you know, sentimental here. Different staircases, but yeah.
Well, so you're getting to something else that I wanted to talk about, which is emotion.
Yes.
And I must say that you know, as somebody who I have my emotions half the time on my sleeve and half the time shoved into my pocket. You know, it's like I can cry at the drop of a hat, and I can stay stoic when everyone else around me is crying. I watched Titanic, and I was like, what's everybody crying about? I don't get it. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Anyway, you did something really incredible, I felt, when we were in Benin together, and it was starting meetings off by asking everyone, what emotions are you feeling right now? And having to reach inside and be like, what emotions am I feeling right now? I'm feeling excited and happy and sad and like tristesse, like yeah, there's like all of the emotions at once, right? And starting a meeting off like that, I had not experienced that. We'd start the meeting by what's the agenda, how long do we need to get through it, who's got to leave early, what's going to happen. That flipped our entire grouping on its head. And all of a sudden, at the end of the meeting, we were all much closer than we had been before. Not everyone was feeling the same emotions. Some of us wept openly. Some of us smiled and giggled. I mean, it was not the same emotion, right, from everyone. I'd like you to talk a little bit about you. You talk in the book about some virtues. And we'll get to the Radical Poise later, but some of these virtues. And you have some interesting pairings. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about them. So you pair like self-restraint balanced with resistance. And this is again making me think of what you were just saying about like, you know, Rosa, was it? Harriet Tubman, sorry. Rosa Parks comes later. Self-restraint balanced with resistance. Humility balanced with civic respect. Some of these aren't obvious pairings. And like you were saying, like the fugitivity, you know, so some of these things we don't always put together. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about these pairings and about emotion and virtue? And virtue.
Yeah, let me back up one step and then get to those political virtues, maybe two steps. So what's the context for this, you know, for the, you know, conceit of this book that I can actually say something new about peace building and democracy. Those have been topics that have been around for a long time. So what's the conceit? The part of the conceit is what we were saying before, that those top-down approaches have not worked, and one needs to think about what can be grown at the bottom and what kinds of steps can be taken on the ground, right, with the kind of flexibility that's needed. So that's one conceit that, well, it hasn't worked the other way, let's try something new. What's the new way? The new way is to sort of resist a kind of purely rational approach to peace building and democracy building. To think that, okay, we need a peace accord, we need to spell out the responsibilities and the duties of both sides. We need to sign that, and we go from a peace agreement to peacekeepers to peace building, and it can be very organized, very rational. Well, I worked for 2 years with the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission in Mali, trying to do that, trying to lay out what would be the, next step after the 2015 peace accord that would lead to reparations for people who had been harmed in the coups and in the violence in Mali for 10 or 15 years. It went nowhere. It literally went nowhere. People would sort of agree on paper to do certain things, but Musa and Baba are shaking their head. They know that Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission went out of business. And they basically put themselves out of business because they didn't address how people felt. They didn't address the regional conflicts, the ethnic conflicts, the political conflicts that were deeply seated in people's emotions, not just in their rational understanding of what's in my self-interest, right? Just appealing to rational self-interest doesn't move the conversation forward. People have to acknowledge and recognize there's anger, there's hatred, there's resentment, there's sometimes even darker emotions, that those are out there and they have to be addressed. But they also have to be countered with other emotions. And here's the conceit, the other part of the conceit. Those other emotions that are often sort of praised, compassion, empathy, forgiveness after a Truth Commission's findings, those don't have much traction, right? And they often have very short lives. So my thought was that those feelings of compassion and empathy and the behaviors that sometimes follow from them for a short time are really moral virtues that are not the most effective in a political world, right? They don't get you up the stairs, right? They may sort of pause the conflict for a moment. There might be a ceasefire. They may sort of result in some generosity for a moment, but when push comes to shove, they don't change the conversation. The same is true, and here's part of that same conceit, the same is true of liberal virtues like tolerance and forbearance. Arguments, rational arguments for why we should tolerate the other. Rational arguments for why, when we have the upper hand, we shouldn't take advantage of it. Forbearance. Those arguments don't work, and those moral, sentimental feelings don't work in a highly sort of fraught, fragile situation. And so what works? And this is where I started sort of shaking the tree. Okay, so what have other people said are alternative forms of political emotions that are positive, political virtues that are not reducible to empathy and compassion? I'm not saying empathy and compassion have no place, but they can't get you to the finish line. And what other political virtues can we look at in place of just counseling tolerance and counseling forbearance? And as I shook the tree, protest and resistance were the first things that fell to the ground as I was reading into the literature, right? Not always in the way, not always the same way in different theorists, but nonviolent protests, nonviolent resistance seems to be something that's political. It requires a kind of judgment, it requires a kind of balance, it requires, and you kind of let the cat out of the bag, my little sort of way of summing it all up it requires radical poise. It requires being able to, I mean, radical poise is a little confusing, because poise sounds like, etiquette, and radical sounds to some people like extreme.
Yes.
So I try to sort of create the kind of a new idea, and that's what the book is really about, the need for radical poise. That's the subtitle. That was supposed to be the title, but the publisher wouldn't let me use it as a title, because he said, the bibliographers won't know where to put this book. If you say the need for radical poise, they might put it in a section on etiquette, or they might put it in they wouldn't know where to put it. And I said, well, maybe you're right, I'm not a bibliographer. So he said, use the subtitle as the title. So actually, everyday peace building through, sometimes I have to read it myself. I can't keep it straight. Everyday peace building through democratic political education was the subtitle of the book. And the need for radical poise was what was driving me. You need to be able to balance humility when you have power, not to use it arrogantly. You need to be able to balance self-restraint when you feel angry, not to let that anger devolve into hatred. Anger can be legitimate. Hatred, that just creates pushback.
Yeah.
That just creates another hater on the other side of the table. So to avoid anger devolving into hatred, and to avoid, power with devolving into arrogance, right? And sort of one-upmanship, I thought you need some self-critical self-reflection. Here's a footnote too, so that's all my conceit. That's sort of shaking the tree, thinking, I need something else besides moral values like compassion and empathy. I need something else besides tolerance and forbearance. Where's it going to come from? Well, it may come from a figure like Mandela. It may come from but eventually it came from artists, right? It was artists who had, the patience and the desire to sort of convey, not always in words, sometimes in images, sometimes in other forms of multimedia representations. This notion of a capacity to balance nonviolent resistance and protest, humility and self-restraint, and a respect for the dignity of others in politics, what I call civic dignity, not religious, dignity, but civic dignity. Yeah. And you really opened a Pandora's box here. And do I want to say anything more about Radical Poise? You'll probably ask me about it.
Yeah, and you've actually teed us up really well for the next, if you go one more. Okay, so, actually, if you go back a little bit. So you organized the book around seeing the demos, joining the demos, and empowering the demos.
Right.
So I would like us to, if we can go to the next slide, tell us a little bit about this work and why you chose it, why you selected it for your book. And so this is the Jacob Lawrence painting.
Right, so this is Jacob Lawrence from his Migration series. It is, I'll tear up if I start talking about this series. It is so moving, right? Chris and I saw it we saw half of it at the Phillips Collection, because the Phillips Collection and the Museum of Modern Art in New York share, the series, which is like 40 paintings, and 20 of them are at the Phillips Collection in DC, and 20 are at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Sometimes they get put together in an exhibit. But every time, we go to DC, and we go frequently for family reasons and other things, we've got to take a stop there. Because when you walk in and you're surrounded by these paintings, which are not large paintings, right? They're about like that. You feel pulled in to the painting. You can't help but feel pulled in. And this is, you know, to go back to my big idea of being on the, that we are people on the move. These are people on the move. This is the Great Migration. They are leaving the Jim Crow South for the North. It is not heaven in the North. They encounter violence in the North. They encounter discrimination in the North, but they can no longer sort of remain right where they are. It's too dangerous to be in the Jim Crow South in the 30s. And I just feel that ontological sort of wisdom in Jacob Lawrence. We are people on the move. And it is not just those folks. It is human beings are on the move. And sometimes they're on the move from violence, and sometimes they're on the move with hope, and sometimes they encounter new obstacles and violence, but they continue to be on the move. And this is a term that I was slow to accept. They show resilience, right? So in the photo voice project that we're doing now in Mali, and that we were planning to do in Benin, that's what took us to Benin, the idea, what's the best way to put this? That's enough, I'll stop there. So this picture captures that movement, human nature as movement, and yeah.
I like the way in the book you talk a lot about procession, you know, and procession, again, is this movement, but often not a movement of one person.
Right.
Movement of many people, and not everyone at the same pace, and not everyone heading in the exact same direction.
Right. It's not a regimental march.
Right.
The thing about Jacob Lawrence, if I could
Yeah.
sort of be so bold, is that his art is narrative art. So the Migration series is just one of many series that he did. He was very prolific, and each series told a story. Right, the story of the American Revolution, the story of the history of struggle in the United States, starting with Native Americans. So the thread that connects Lawrence is a historical narrative thread in each of his series. And the Migration series is a historical narrative of these people and the travails and the precarious lives that they've lived. That's one way in which you can convey to the viewer the importance of what I call radical poise. He doesn't use that phrase, but the ability to make your way through that sort of vale of tears sometimes and remain hopeful. He did a series on Harriet Tubman and saw the hope in her eyes and the hope in her life, but he also saw the limitations of that work that she was doing, and that it wasn't the end of the road by any means.
And what I really appreciate too about art and work like this is, you know, I'm an anthropologist by trade, and one of the criticisms of early anthropology writings, and I'm sure it's not just early, but was like an anthropologist would come into a community and they would write as if the community had always been like that and would always be like that, whatever that was, right? And not thinking of it as a snapshot in time, not capturing the motion that is society and life and family and community and politics and everything else. And sometimes, like, you know, what reading in your book too about the fact of this piece shows movement. It's not just people in line, it's not people whatever, like seeing, especially you've got the little kids sort of swinging the bag, right? Like, so it shows the movement, and that maybe the kid's gonna twirl around and then keep going, and there's some hope there, but there's also some, the thoughts of what are we leaving? We're leaving something that maybe there were some great connections that we had. We don't know if we're gonna have that same connection here of people who are around us, right? Like, we're gonna remake our lives somewhere else. We have hope of maybe it being better. That's why we're leaving our connections. And I find often in anthropology, our writings were so just like, that's the way it is, and that's all. So I've really appreciated over the years trying to understand how to write in a way that captures motion, that captures that we're just here in these fleeting moments. And I'll digress really quickly. I once had an assignment as an undergrad in Wayne State, and our professor had us go do a description of an area. And they said, okay, now you can walk anywhere around on campus or just off campus and write 3 pages, every single thing you see. And I wrote that paper in 2002 or something, and I still have it. And I sometimes go back to that exact same place, and I can see, wow, like this place has changed so much. But when I wrote it, I was writing it like, this is the way it is. And so then learning over time, like, I've got to shift my gears so that I try to write, and I'm not telling the reader this is the way it is and always has been, but this is the way it is right now at this moment. And I'm finding this in the art that you've used and really amazing in the book. Can we go then to the next slide?
Before we shift gears to Kentridge, is it Kentridge you want to go to?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah. So the word I was searching for before, and it's sort of an interesting Freudian moment, is resilience, right? And that's what I resisted. I thought of resilience not as radical poise, not as active, but as a kind of passive adaptation to the given, right? So you're resilient in the face of a world that is immovable. And I didn't really think that resilience captured the strength and the vitality and the movement of the people that were represented by Lawrence, or in the next slide by William Kentridge, or by the people we work with in Mali. But in the last 2 years, as we've been working in the camps for internally displaced persons with youth, and we'll get to this, I hope, the pictures they took, the titles they gave the pictures, the captions that they wrote for the pictures, often came back to the word resilience. And by resilience, they meant acts of endurance, not adaptation to an unchanging given, but resilience in the face of conflict that involves both critical understanding and action. And that changed my mind, and we're now, the 3 team leaders and I are co-authoring an article on resilience, and I'm teachable, I guess.
That's good.
So that's why that was where I did a little stop. My mind stopped a minute because it was a moment of embarrassment. Okay. All right.
So then let's see if we can go, and if we can watch the video. I do have it queued up on another one, but if you'll click from there. Fingers crossed.
Me?
Yes.
So the first time I saw that, it just took my breath away. I was mesmerized by it. And it's something that Kentridge has written about, has talked about. It is, for him, a collage of the many, many different people with the burdens that they carry, marching through their lives, sometimes carrying each other, sometimes carrying their homes on their back, sometimes, struggling because they're wounded in war. It is a profile of people. It's also, at a philosophical level, a kind of counter-allegory to Plato's allegory of the cave, right? If you remember back when somebody asked you to read Plato's Republic, there's a chapter in there about the cave and how the demos, the people, are chained in the cave, and all they see are shadows on the wall. And because they don't know anything else, they come to believe those shadows on the wall are reality. And it's only when one of them escapes and comes up into the light and sees the real world that he realizes that he's been living in an illusory world of appearance. And he goes back down to free his fellow citizens, and he tells them, you've been believing in, fantasy. These are not real. Those are shadows. They're not real. And they set upon him and they kill him. Right? And one way of interpreting that allegory is we need to not reject the real truth. We need to accept the truth of the philosopher king who has seen the true life and the truth above the cave, and abandon the shadow life that we have been forced into through conditioning and schooling and other kinds of chains that we live in. For Kentridge, it's just the opposite, right? The real world is a world in which people are moving, in which the truth changes, in which we have to sort of keep our eye on. If you watch that video carefully, you'll see there are actually two layers, right? There are the sharper shadows that are cast against the background, and then there are the objects that are casting their shadow, who are fuzzy because the camera is focused on the back, right? So there are these fuzzy images that come across. That's not just bad photography, that's intentional to say, we have to understand there are real things, and those real things cast shadows, and sometimes the shadows are sharper than the real things. And we have to sort of infer from the shadow what else is in our life. We have to sort of be creative, and we have to be creative and not hold out this hope that there is a fixed truth that some philosopher king can reveal to us up in the bright, shining light. We live in a cave. We live in a world of shadows and realities, and we have to know how to move between those shadows and the realities. And sometimes the shadow is sharper than the reality, but that's the world that we live in. That's the world. Did that help?
That did help. And I think that, so, the last two things that we've looked at are about seeing the demos, and then we moved to joining the demos.
Right.
And in the interest of time, we have 20 minutes left. I feel like, I know, this has been a great conversation. It's gone so quickly. I feel like we should, maybe we skip over the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo.
Yeah.
Which is, you can get this link afterwards. I'm sure we can have a copy of the PowerPoint later. But what if we move directly towards, if we skip over one more, okay, this is also great. I don't,
This is all
3 minutes.
acting on,
Yeah.
our knowledge of the world. How do we act on it? So there's that in the book.
Yeah, in the book, and it is great. Like again, what I love about your book is, you have theory, you have plenty of theory. You have also lots of action. You have lots of practice. And talking about peace building and talking about the peace of tous les jours, the acts that it takes means sometimes getting off our butts and doing something, not just talking about it, not just thinking about it, not just theorizing on it, but doing something. And in that doing something, we also expose ourselves, we expose our emotions, we expose ourselves. If we go to a protest, right, we are exposing ourselves in many ways. And I'd like to then quickly now get to, we're gonna have to skip over this one too, I'm sorry. This is great. Well,
These are photo voice projects that inspired the photo voice project we're doing in Mali right now.
yeah.
This is in Central America.
In Central America. And what's really amazing is if we go back just one more real quick, this is a cemetery before a photo voice project where the community documented something that was bothering them and had a way of expressing it and saying, we want to change this. We're walking by it every day, like you're talking about those walks. Walking by it every day, wanting to do something different and changing it. And through photo voice, we have the before, and then if you switch here, to after. So to this move from thought to action, from seeing to doing something, but through photo voice. So now I would like to just lay the groundwork here for the next photo, which brings us to the photo voice project in Mali.
Yeah. So for 3 years, we've been working in these camps for internally displaced persons that Marcy mentioned at the beginning. And no school, they have no school in the camps. They can't go to the schools in the neighboring communities, especially the young kids, because they get bullied for having come from the camps. So the parents don't send them to the neighborhood school. Some of the older kids go to high school, but most of the younger kids don't go to school at all. So we saw this is why we changed the title to a literacy project. We saw photo voice as a way of giving them a voice and giving them an opportunity to do some writing and do some reflection on the history and the context of the camps. And at first the young people took pictures of what we might call the hardships and the sadness in the camps, like this unsanitary picture of one of the camps that's flooded during the rainy season. But gradually they shifted their focus to some of the strengths of the elders, as well as some of the strengths of the women, and some of the intergenerational activities that were going on, some of the relationships between husbands and wives, cooking together. And so that's when the concept of resilience kind of percolated up and became their way of talking about, their life in the camps. And they didn't want the camp to simply, be a place that people would avoid or not talk about. They wanted people to know that what we are doing here is making a life, not the life we would prefer, but the life that we can make here. So it was about doing and becoming as young people. And it is quite inspiring. We have a photo album. We have a photo album of their pictures, which is soon to be released, which we can give to the African Studies Center to go with the book. And we're sort of thinking about next steps. What do we do with the next round of the Photo Voice project, and how can we make that a more interactive project? Their recognition of the importance of the elders in the camp was really very, very surprising to me. because the elders did not feel recognized. But these young kids, when they chose the pictures they wanted to exhibit in the Photo Voice exhibits in the camps, many of the pictures had pictures of elders. So those are the positive pictures, not like this first picture.
Yeah, if you.
Sometimes it's like parenting, right? That's why parents feel like that sometimes with your own kids, right? They'll go listen to other people sometimes. And
Yeah,
like, oh, okay.
exactly.
And then at a certain age, then they start looking back and say, okay, maybe they're there.
Yeah, and this picture is actually the kids showing that the kids work together, right? So these are young girls collecting discarded charcoal in the camps to be used by their families because their families can't afford to buy charcoal. So they go around in the mornings, and this picture was taken by another young woman in the group. So that's that picture. I don't know if you want to show one picture of it. This is, they titled this picture, Play as a Weapon of Hope. Right? And this is also a powerful picture of how the kids find each other and create a kind of resilience.
I really appreciate, just really quickly, that juxtaposition again, weapon of hope.
Yeah.
You know, those two words that you wouldn't necessarily put together.
Yeah.
And they did, and it wasn't through just, this is the first thing that came to my mind. There was a long process of talking to the kids, working with their mentors, working with the team leaders, and really coming up with something that was meaningful. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, we said, don't just say, this is a picture of me and my friends. Which was their first impulse, right? What's this a picture of? Oh, that's me, and that's my friend. So that's not going to get people to talk about your picture, right? And so finally, oh, I get it. How about play as a weapon of hope? Yeah, and that works. Yeah. Works for me.
Right?
I don't know if that's for you or not. This is a picture that they couldn't come up with a title for, besides food. But the picture, it seems to me, speaks for itself. It is a husband and wife cooking together. That is not common in the village where they come from. But, you know, as that's what they said, we're cooking together, we have to. We have to find a way to cook together. And so the kids were definitely impressed by this husband and wife. They're cooking something called toe, which is a breakfast food that lasts all day long and is an acquired taste. Okay. This picture is a picture of a man who's making a rope and is sort of figuring out how to do that without the equipment that he has in his village. It's the kind of ingenuity and resilience. Work as a weapon of resilience. If I had to pick a title, work as a weapon of resilience, right? That's a juxtaposition that you wouldn't find, you know, in other places. But I don't know, when you think about your work, I don't think of it as a weapon of resilience. Right? Think of it as work. Work is work. Yeah. And these are kids eating together. Maybe we can go a little faster. This is a woman who is another resilience title, The Resilience of Women in Community. She is spinning cotton. She dressed up for this picture. She's wearing a fancy cotton that has commemorative sayings on the dress. She's a grandmother, and she does it to provide cotton for other women and tailors who are creating clothes for the community. So it's not a personal ambition or enterprise. This is a complicated story, and this is the elder that is the most powerful elder, I think, of them all. I mean, he is not just hanging out, right? He is thinking about what's going on, what's my role in this community, where do I belong now? And the young kid who wrote this, Makaro is the word for, I think you guys can correct me, is the word for elder. And the young kid who took the picture said, "The elders are the pillars of our families and societies in the context of displaced persons. They are the guardians of collective resilience. This old man plays a very important role in the events of the camp." That is not how many of the elders felt in these camps. They felt like they had lost their place. They didn't have the authority that they had in the village. People didn't come to them to adjudicate, issues of property and family disagreements. But for this young mentee, this elder sort of represented in his kind of interesting posture an alternative to that, being sidelined. He's on his side, but not sidelined. And the same for this woman, right, who shows, an awareness of all the competing demands on her, but she's not flinching. She is not stepping away from the work. It's work as a weapon of resilience. In her case, she's filling all those bottles. She's taking them around, all those containers. Not easy work. Okay.
Yeah, and then we have a video that we'll show, but what I wanted to mention is that, the work of the Photo Voice project was not completed when the book was completed. So the book leaves off with the Photo Voice project being in motion. And it's still in motion, and there were exhibits in each of the camps where the mentees were able to, they had the printed out versions put up all over in an area for an exhibit, and the mentees were able to take the mic and talk about their photographs, talk about not only the photographs, but the skills that they got learning photography. And what I really found interesting, and it's in the video that we'll show to close things out, is one of the young people, and again gets to that walking, and where he says in the video, "I used to walk around and I didn't know many people and I didn't greet them. But now because of this Photo Voice project of going around and asking people, can I take your photo? I need permission to take your photo," getting to know them means that I now greet people all over. And creating that sort of the piece of every day, right? These are now people you didn't maybe know before, maybe you didn't want to be neighbors, but you are, and you need to cultivate the piece of tous les jours. And it's that everyday indicator. So I really appreciate this conversation and the book and your work. Amazing.
And our partnership with you.
Yeah, it's been great.
Do people want a 5-minute video? Can you handle 5 minutes?
Yeah.
It's just 5 minutes. So
the
the captions and the voiceover are all in French, but it's self-explanatory. From one of the mentees talking about how he recognized joy and sadness. This is a voiceover by one of the team leaders, Moussa J. Dambale, talking about the purpose, the earlier work that we did in 2005 to 2012 in the schools in Mali. And this is the beginning of this is our entry in the camps. These are elders sitting in the camp doing nothing. These are some of the picture books that Chris helped us make with fabric art. Then we did a political simulation, a peace game. Those are the books that were printed. That's an audience in front of the Truth and Justice and Reconciliation Commission. You can see they were not moved very much by our presentation. This is the peace game with the kids playing in Kati. Really exciting. They really enjoyed it. Now we're in the camps. Some of the pictures were difficult. This is one of the mentors explaining to the women in the camp, what the heck is this all about? Who's in this picture? Why are you doing this? That was a great kind of way of introducing the project. Then we handed out flyers like this one. You can see the picture. And now we get to the part Marcy was talking about, where the mentees are explaining their own photographs to the rest of the people in their camps. And there were 10 camps in 6 different locations. And that's the picture you saw before. They're explaining. And that's a wide-angle shot of the community dialogue that followed the exhibit of the photos. And here you'll see some of the photos you saw before. This is one of the mentors explaining, getting the community dialogue sort of ready to go. And she was really very, very good at connecting with the adults in the camps. Here's a focus group that we did after the exhibit, where the mentor and 2 mentees and one of the group leaders, Boubacar Garango, are sort of talking about what kinds of emotions were raised in the meeting and how it worked. I think that'll do it. Now it's going to just run through the same pictures we saw before. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So that's a trailer for a 25-minute video that we will present to the Vice Chancellor of the university on Saturday and say, join us. And hopefully, I think he will, because he's already sort of joined the COIL program that we're working on. So I got a notice from Letitia saying that Andre Kone is now in the COIL program. So I think it's not going to be a hard sell. They're going to go for it.
Well, please join me in